Welcome to Ask Davis. I am Davis, and on this channel we cover retirement and personal finance in plain language. No jargon, no fluff, just what you actually need to know. Today, I want to address one of the most common statements I hear from people in their late 50s and early 60s when the topic of retirement income comes up. I will just keep working. It sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible even. But according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, one of the most respected independent research organizations in the field of retirement security, nearly 50% of working Americans expect to work in retirement, either part-time or full-time, as a core component of their financial plan. Today, I want to look at what the full data says about that expectation, because the picture that follows that statistic is one that every pre-retiree needs to understand before it is too late to adjust. Let me begin with the gap. The Employee Benefit Research Institute has tracked retirement expectations versus retirement reality for over 2 decades through its annual Retirement Confidence Survey. And what that longitudinal data shows is consistent and striking. While approximately 48 to 50% of workers expect to work in retirement, only about 27% of actual retirees report having worked at any point after leaving the workforce. That is a gap of more than 20 percentage points. And it is not a rounding error. It is a structural pattern that has held steady across economic cycles, across different generations of retirees, and across different income levels. The gap exists because the assumption that you will be able to work in retirement is just that, an assumption. And assumptions are not plans. Now, I want to be specific about why that gap exists because understanding the mechanism is what allows you to plan around it. The first and most powerful reason people retire earlier than they planned is health, not preference, not financial readiness. Health. The AARP Public Policy Institute has published extensive research showing that more than half of people who retire earlier than they expected do so involuntarily, and the most frequently cited reason is a health event. Either a personal diagnosis, an injury, a surgery with a longer than expected recovery, or the onset of a chronic condition that makes sustained employment difficult or impossible. We are not talking about catastrophic illness exclusively. We are talking about the kind of moderate but persistent health challenges that become increasingly common in the 6th and 7th decade of life. Joint pain that makes a commute unbearable, cardiac events that require lifestyle changes, vision or hearing loss that affects job performance. These are not rare. They are, statistically speaking, the norm for a significant percentage of Americans in their early 60s. The second major reason is workforce-related displacement. Many workers who plan to continue working into their mid-60s or beyond find that the labor market has other plans. Company restructurings, acquisitions, and layoffs disproportionately target higher salary employees, and in many industries, those are the workers over 55. Age discrimination in hiring and retention is explicitly illegal under the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, which applies to workers 40 and older. But enforcement is difficult. Documentation of discriminatory intent is hard to produce, and many workers who suspect they have been targeted choose not to pursue litigation. What the data shows is that workers over 60 who lose a job take significantly longer to find reemployment than younger workers. And when they do find work, it is frequently at a substantially lower income level than their previous position. That is not a plan. That is a setback. The third factor, and this one is discussed less frequently, is cognitive change over time. I am not talking exclusively about diagnosed dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Longitudinal cognitive research published in academic journals, including Neuropsychology and the Journal of Gerontology, consistently documents that processing speed, working memory, and executive function, the cognitive tools required for most complex professional work, begin to show measurable decline in many adults by the mid to late 60s. This is highly individual, and it does not affect everyone in the same way or on the same timeline. But the assumption that your capacity to perform demanding professional work at 68 or 70 will be identical to your capacity at 58 is one that the population-level data does not support as a universal truth. For some people, it will be accurate. For others, it will not. Building a retirement financial plan that requires it to be accurate without a contingency, if it is not, is a structural risk. Now here is where this conversation shifts from a health and workforce discussion into a personal finance discussion, which is the reason you are watching this channel. I want to pause here for a moment. If you are listening to this and you recognize that the phrase, "I will just keep working," has been functioning as a financial plan rather than a preference, I put together something specifically designed for people in this situation. It is called the 90-Day Protocol, Retire at 62 Without Regret. It is a step-by-step system that walks you through exactly the kind of income gap analysis, Social Security strategy, and portfolio stress testing we are discussing today in a format you can work through on your own time. The link is in the first comment below. Now back to the numbers, because this is where the planning becomes concrete. The Social Security Administration reports that the average monthly benefit for a worker who claims at the full retirement age of 67 in 2025 is approximately $1,907 per month. That is $22,884 per year. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, the median household headed by someone between the ages of 65 and 74 spends approximately $50,000 per year. The gap between what Social Security provides and what retirement costs is therefore approximately $27,000 annually for the average household. That $27,000 per year has to come from somewhere: a pension, a portfolio, rental income, part-time work, or a combination. If part-time work was carrying a significant portion of that gap and part-time work is no longer available, the math breaks immediately. And because Social Security is not retroactively adjustable, and because portfolio withdrawals taken under financial pressure rather than strategic planning carry their own set of compounding risks, the time to solve for that gap is before it appears, not after. Here is the structured response. 5 steps. In order. Step 1. Model your retirement without earned income as the baseline. Before you plan anything else, run your numbers assuming zero income from work. Use your projected Social Security benefit at 62, 65, and 67. Include any pension income if applicable. Include realistic required minimum distributions, which are the mandatory annual withdrawals the IRS requires from your traditional IRA and 401k accounts beginning at age 73. What does the monthly income look like? What is the gap? That gap is the number you are solving for with everything else in your plan. If you cannot solve for it without earned income, you now know the specific amount you need to address. And you have time to address it. Step 2. Treat any earned income in retirement as discretionary, not structural. If you do work in retirement, and many people do, on their own terms, doing work they find meaningful, that income should fund the parts of your retirement that make it richer: travel, experiences, gifts to grandchildren, charitable giving. It should not be the difference between making your mortgage payment and not making it. A retirement plan that survives without earned income is a resilient plan. A retirement plan that requires earned income to function is a fragile one. Step 3. Stress test your Social Security claiming strategy against an involuntary early exit from the workforce. The conventional guidance for people in good health with sufficient savings is to delay Social Security until age 70, capturing the approximately 8% annual increase in benefits that applies for each year of delay beyond full retirement age. That strategy is mathematically sound under the right conditions. But if you exit the workforce involuntarily at 62 or 63 and your savings are not sufficient to cover living expenses for 7 or 8 years without Social Security, the delay strategy may not be viable. You need to understand in advance what your monthly income looks like if you claim at 62, at 65, and at 67, and which of those scenarios your savings can actually support. Step 4. Plan specifically for the healthcare gap between retirement and Medicare eligibility. Medicare coverage begins at age 65. If you stop working before 65, you lose access to employer-sponsored health insurance, and private market alternatives carry a significant cost. For a couple in their early 60s purchasing a silver tier plan through the Affordable Care Act marketplace, premiums alone can range from $1,200 to $2,000 per month, depending on their state, Plan selection and income. That is between $14,400 and $24,000 per year before any deductibles, co-payments, or prescription costs. This is one of the most frequently underestimated line items in early retirement planning, and it is one that can be managed through income positioning, through health savings account balances carried from working years, or through gap year budgeting, but only if it is identified and planned for in advance. Step 5. Establish a 2-year cash reserve before you retire. One of the most structurally damaging scenarios in retirement finance is what researchers call sequence of returns risk, the compounding damage caused when a significant market decline occurs in the first 2 to 3 years of retirement, forcing the retiree to sell portfolio assets at depressed prices to cover living expenses. Those losses are permanent. The shares sold at a loss during a downturn are no longer available to participate in the recovery. A 2-year cash reserve held in a high-yield savings account or short-duration instruments insulates your portfolio from that forced selling dynamic. It gives your investments time to recover while you live on cash. This is not a sophisticated or exotic strategy. It is a structural buffer that every retirement portfolio should have in place before the first withdrawal is made. Here is the bottom line. 50% of Americans plan to work in retirement. For many of them, that intention reflects something genuine, a love of work, a desire for engagement and purpose, or an honest recognition that their savings need supplementing. All of those motivations are valid. The problem is not the intention to work. The problem is when that intention becomes a load-bearing wall in a financial plan that has no backup if the wall is removed. The data shows clearly that a large percentage of retirees who plan to work are not working, not because they changed their minds, but because the decision was taken from them. The planning response is not to give up on the idea of working in retirement. The planning response is to build a retirement that survives without it, and then let any income you earn be the bonus on top. I would like to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Are you someone who has been counting on part-time or full-time work as part of your retirement income strategy? And has this conversation shifted how you think about that? I read the comments, and I find this kind of direct feedback genuinely useful for shaping future content. If this video was useful to you, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel, and it means more content like this one. This is Davis. I will see you in the next one.